Hello there, you're watching The Probe on the Joy News channel. Well, tonight we're having a conversation that you might have heard before, except that it's coming up again because of Ghana's woeful economic condition. Well, in just a space of about 2 years, a group of individuals calling themselves Article 71 office holders will be smiling to the bank. And that's because the Constitution makes room for the payment of ex gratia, or you may want to call it a special retirement package for the president, his vice, and a host of others who you find here on our screens. Well, experts are beginning to raise concerns that the payment of this ex gratia is increasingly becoming a monster, draining the public purse after every political cycle. So tonight we're asking that question. Given Ghana's weak economic position, should we consider an immediate revision of Article 71 of the 1992 Constitution, or perhaps put on hold the payment of ex gratia for the foreseeable future? That's the question we're asking tonight. Feel free to be a part of The Probe. We're live on Joy News, Joy 99.7 FM, myjoyonline.com, and all the social media platforms. Feel free to be part of the show. It's interactive. We'll be happy to hear from you. After the break, I'll tell you about my guest helping me with the discussion. Please stay. And you're welcome back to The Probe. We're looking at the payment of ex gratia. Should we consider a review of Article 71 of Ghana's 1992 Constitution, or at least put on hold the payment for the foreseeable future? I want to introduce my guest now, helping us with that discussion. Professor Godfred Bokun is an economist with the University of Ghana Business School. He's joining us via Zoom. Bernard J is also General Secretary for the Public Sector Workers Union. They have a position on the matter as well. Austin Game is also joining The Probe tonight. He's a labor consultant and he's a former member of parliament seeking to make a return. Ras Mubarak was on the Public Accounts Committee when he was representing the Kumbungu constituency in Parliament. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on The Probe. But even before we start off with the discussion, I just want us to go back to look at the process involved in terms of the determination of this ex gratia and how we arrive at the payments. The last example that we have was the Professor Yamwa Beidou committee, or commission if you want to call them as such, and their determination or recommendations as far back as 2020 on what should be done to officers who have served between the 2017 to 2020 period. So you have that on your screens right now, indicating what the recommendation was. Now, there is a special process that we go through, and that includes the determination of salaries for other members of this Article 71, with the exception of the president and the vice. So when it comes to the determination of ex gratia for this class of individuals you find on the screens right now, including the Speaker, MPs, some of the commissioners, Commissioner for Straj, for instance, and the Chief Justice, the Auditor General, all these individuals have the confirmation of that recommendation as made by the special committee that recommends how much ex gratia should be paid. You have them determined by the president. And then vice versa, when it comes to the determination for the president, the vice, the chairperson, and members of the Council of State, and also other ministers and deputy ministers, then you have Parliament coming through to approve whatever recommendation has been done by the special 5-member committee that will be set up in line with Article 71 as directed by the president. So it's a back and forth situation. But in terms of a sense of how much we've been spending as a state, that's what you're about to realize in terms of how we go about, of course, paying some of these members, people who are classified under Article 71. And that's what you have on your screens right now, giving you a sense of how much the members of parliament, for instance, are earning as salaries, and what the president as well and the vice president has been earning in that first term, which is 2017 to 2020. So that's it for that first term, 2017 to 2020. For instance, for the president, we're looking at, in terms of the salary, some amounts okay, so the amount is on the screens right now for those of you watching us on TV, and for radio, here's the amount. It's 47,277. And then for the vice president, you have 39,397 for the vice president. In terms of the Speaker of Parliament, you have 35,021 Ghana cedis. For the Chief Justice there with 34,146 Ghana cedis. The cabinet ministers follow through with 33,270. And those who are cabinet ministers are earning around 32,832. You then have the chairperson and members of the Council of State, 28,455 for the chairperson, and you have 28,017 Ghana cedis for the members of that Council of State. And then for Parliament as well, you have them ranging in that sphere as well. But after the salary is also determined, there's a payment of what you would want to call a retirement package, which is where we're moving to now, which is the elephant in the room that we're discussing as to whether or not we should put that on hold. So for the ex gratia, for the period of 2017 to 2020, you have the president, as of the first term of his office, earning some 659,392. The vice president following through with 549,492. The Speaker of Parliament then comes through with 488,456. The cabinet ministers, 464,032. So that's 464,032 Ghana cedis. The cabinet ministers, those who are non-MPs, are earning slightly lower with some 457,928. The members of Parliament themselves come through with 390,768 in terms of the amounts that they take. And for the members of the Council of State is 366,340. So that gives you a picture of how much it is that we're doling out to this Article 71 members. And of course, you may grant the salaries, but how about the ex gratia, which is a substantial amount that we're doling out to them as a retirement package, or as the Constitution would describe it, an award to these categories of persons. Given our weak economic position, should we go ahead and pay this in the next political cycle, which is just due in 2 years? We'll still be running an IMF program. I want to bring in my guest now. Ras Mubarak is a former member of Parliament. I'll be coming to him shortly for him to also tell us what his thoughts are. But let me start off with you, Professor Bobkin, because the economic position of Ghana now is not too favorable. Looking at the figures that we just presented on the screens a while ago, would it make a difference if we put it on hold, review Article 71, or perhaps ask this category of officers to spare the states that amount?
Well, good evening, and then good evening to your cherished listeners and co-panelists. Certainly it would. I think we are making the case that pensioners have to sacrifice something. We are making the case that ordinary Ghanaians who earn so less compared to Article 71 public office holders to sacrifice, and therefore it will be very difficult to sell this idea that we can continue to pay the ex gratia in the way we have been doing it over the years. And I think that the conversation is even bigger than just looking at Article 71 public office holders. We are looking at the whole governance reform in a manner that would secure our democracy for the common good, because the democracy we have right now does not serve the ordinary Ghanaian, and that is a fact. The democratic dividend does not trickle down to the ordinary Ghanaian, and we cannot continue like this. And therefore, we should instead of it being packaged as just Article 71 holders, we should look at the whole cost of our governance. And let's ask ourselves whether the economy will be able to sustain that. If the economy cannot, then we should ask ourselves which ones can we put aside for now without sacrificing growth. There are some expenditure cuts that will be growth enhancing. There are other expenditure cuts that would inhibit growth. And I believe that cutting down or suspending ex gratia, as we have come to know it, maybe probably until 2040 or so. And why am I saying so?
2040?
In the wisdom of
you're asking that we put it on hold until 2040?
Yeah, the reason I'm saying so is that if you look at the new instruments that have been issued in exchange for the old bonds, government perspective is that the last installment payment, you can only get it by 2038. In other words, if you look at the strength of the economy and what it could sustain, then probably that is how we have stretched it up to, right? And therefore, it's going to be very difficult to make a case in between this that we will be able to accommodate certain or extra costs within that same period. That will be difficult to sell to those who went through the haircuts. Let me put it that way. Now, the other perspective we need to look at is that if you look at the data from Ghana Statistical Service, that more than 80% of public sector workers earn less than 3,000 Ghana cedis, right? And then yet you look at the overall wage bill. Of course, it's not an outlier in the sub-region. And why am I saying so? Because Ghana's minimum wage per capita GDP is the lowest in West Africa. But if you look at the overall wage bill relative to total expenditure, you see that it's a little high. The reason that has become particularly elevated is because of the proportion of interest payment that consumes our total revenue, or even as a percentage of total expenditure. That is where the issue is. But the other issue we need to look at is that does democracy work for everyone? The question will be no. If you look at the wage inequality within the public sector pay mechanism, it's a bit worrying, and that itself is a threat to our common democracy. Why am I saying so? So somebody works for, let's say, 30 years, really under very stressful conditions, and goes home with far less. And then somebody serves with all that comes with it, right, for 4 years. And he takes an ex gratia of something, maybe 81 times, 100 times what someone probably under very, very stressful conditions had worked for more than 30 years. And all of that. So we should be looking at this whole thing in such a we should be looking at this whole thing in such a way that we don't create the impression that the democracy we are operationalizing is only for the privileged few, to the detriment of the less privileged or the less equals.
And Prof, the point you're raising is why I want to bring in Ras Mubarak. Ras, you've been a beneficiary of this ex gratia. Now you're making another attempt to go into Parliament. But that aside, how does it make you feel whenever the conversation comes up that you in the political class arrogate to yourself all the juicy rewards, the retirement packages, and yet you leave the masses pour out thereafter?
Well, good evening to our viewers and my co-panel members. Let me begin by saying that it is not everything that is legal that may be morally right. And the issue of ex gratia certainly is one of them. To put the conversation in proper perspective, a review would require some constitutional amendment. You know, Article 71 is an entrenched clause in the Constitution of the Republic, and that would require for the executive arm of government, you know, to bring a constitutional amendment bill to Parliament. We are where we are today. I haven't had this conversation time and again, simply because there's never been that political will, you know, to address the elephant in the room. But also think that there are two issues at play. So first of all, members of Parliament, for example, because I had been a member of Parliament, let me use that as an example, contract officers of the state. They get a contract for 4 years. Now, when MPs start their tenure, they don't even know what their salaries are because they are paid based on, previous salaries and allowances. So at the end of 4 years, then you see, governments rushing to set, the committee pushing to make recommendations. So when the back pay, because you put out some graphs out there, it is actually the back pay of, these members of parliament over a 4-year period. Don't forget, when there are increases in salaries and COLA and all of that, it doesn't reflect in the salaries of members of parliament simply because they are paid based on the salaries of a previous parliament. And so the amount comes out as a very huge sum of money, and that obviously has culminated in the hue and cry about the ex gratia. We also need to have a separation. First of all, there are political appointees, like members of parliament, like ministers of state, and the rest of it, who are Article 71 office holders. And there are persons with guaranteed tenure of office who, if they did not misconduct themselves, would hold their office for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So you've got, the justices of the Superior Court, you've got the chairperson of the NCC, Shraj Boss, Electoral Commissioner, and their deputies. Their salaries and, their jobs are guaranteed until retirement, And it becomes very baffling that at every 4-year period, these category of people who are well taken care of, by the way, by the state, are given ex gratia. Okay? Whereas members of parliament who don't have a guaranteed tenure of office, because after 4 years they could be brought back or, decided not to, the people could decide not to bring them back. So you've got members of parliament who are not returning, earning ex gratia, those who are returning, earning ex gratia, and you've got people with a guaranteed tenure of office also earning ex gratia. And clearly, that is where the immorality of the situation comes in, especially so if you look at the disparity. So, for instance, members of parliament have to pay for the vehicles that they use, albeit subsidized. Members of the bench don't pay for their vehicles. They don't buy fuel into their vehicles. They don't pay for insurance. All right? But when the discussion is out there in the public, the impression is created that it is members of parliament who are fleecing the state.
Is this not professional? Is this not professional jealousy here?
No. It is not professional jealousy. I'll give you a typical example. Professor Ayini, Dr. Ayini, Honorable Ayini. Now, people he has taught in school who are currently at the bench earn about 35,000 Ghana cedis a month. These are people he's taught in law school. He, as a member of parliament, has a take-home pay of about 12,000 Ghana cedis. So clearly, it's not professional jealousy. But I'm saying that the entire architecture of Article 71 has to be looked at. We have to do it with all the seriousness that we can muster, so that year in, year out, we don't come back having the same conversation.
Okay,
especially now, if I may land on this point, especially now when the country's economy has crashed. But of course, we are not where we are because of the payment of ex gratia. We are where we are because of extreme recklessness on the part of the executive in managing the economy. And clearly, members of parliament would have to take the blame. So if you're saying that everybody has to take a hit, obviously members of parliament were the ones approving these loans. And if it's gotten us where we are and everyone has to make sacrifices, clearly all of us, would have to make those sacrifices.
Okay.
But I don't think a chunk of the monies that are paid at the end of a 4-year period are actually the ex gratia. It's just a minute component. So when I was at the end of my time in Parliament, it was around 290,000 or so as the ex gratia. But if you look at the back pay, it was about a little over 400,000. Okay, but it gets put together, presented out there as MPs taking, more than 600,000 cities after every 4 years.
Right. I see that.
That is not the case.
Right. I see that.
My thinking, I mean, if MPs are returning, obviously they don't deserve ex gratia.
I see the point you're raising. We'll get into the details of how we can, properly reform Article 71. But there are others joining the conversation. Austin Gami is with us. I'll come to you, Mr. Gami, shortly. But I just want to hear from Bernard Ajay, because Bernard, just last week, we heard from the Ghana Statistical Service. They were pointing out to us that about 80% of your worker population, those who find themselves in the public sector, they earn less than 3,000 Ghana cedis. And yet, you're making all of the sacrifices now. We're in an economic mess. We'll still be paying ex gratia simply because of the constitutional provisions. You believe it's time we change that?
Well, thank you very much, Blaise, and I thank the other guests, especially those who have also spoken. And for us, it's something we have been talking about all this while. Before even all this mess we find ourselves in. So we have already been calling for the review of the Article 71 office holders and how their remuneration and ex gratia are being determined. We have two issues as Labour when it comes to Article 71, and one that is how their salaries are determined. Ras Mubarak just said that when they come into office, they don't even know how much they are to earn, because the president waits until the end of his term or getting to the end of his term before the committee is constituted. And we are of the view that the president doesn't have to wait. When we all get our letters of appointment, whether it's a contract employment, whether it's a permanent employment or not, your contract of employment always comes with how much salary and other conditions of service. So we in Labour have always had issues with how Article 71 salaries are determined. And the second is the ex gratia. We thought that is totally a no-no. If we have agreed as a country that, look, government cannot pay ex gratia to the public servant who has worked all his life for between 20 to 30 years under very strenuous conditions, very low salaries. If we are saying as a country that that person does not deserve an ex gratia, then it is very difficult to fathom or to understand why someone who is taking a bigger chunk of the cake still deserves an ex gratia. So our position as Labour has been clear on this even before we found ourselves in this mess.
But Ras Mubarak was explaining nuances of it. The fact that you run a contract for 4 years, there's no guarantee you'd be getting back into Parliament, for instance.
No, but that is the contract. That is how they came in. When you go to the public sector and I deal with other public agencies that are not paid directly by central government, like the airport, VRA, and co. I mean, there are contract staff there. There are contract workers there. So, I mean, for me, we should look at the other side of the issue, which has to do with principles of salary administration. And there are principles. There should be transparency, there should be relativity, there should be fairness and equity. And these things are also done based on the resources you have. So it's not an issue about whether your contract is just for a short time or not. If it's for a short time, it is still governed by certain principles. And it's relative to other people who are also performing services. So I think nobody also forces anybody to become an MP or to become an ordinary public servant or work in any other place, either private or public sector. Sometimes those are also personal decisions we make. But the principles that are needed to be employed so that anybody who becomes as an MP earns what he deserves to be earning, we don't have a problem with that. But if it's done such that the little resource we have, it appears that a certain group or section of the population is allocated a chunk of that to the disadvantage of the larger workforce, which also, does a lot, we all know. We think that there's something wrong somewhere, and we have been calling for a review of that for so many years. And now that we are in a crisis, if it has come up, our position remains the same, and it will be unthinkable that we who get a smaller part of the pie, we make all these sacrifices, take all these haircuts, including those who are on pension, take all these haircuts, then we still have the moral right and justification to insist or to say that Article 71 should still get what they want. I would want to agree with Prof, but still to say that even 2040, it shouldn't be on the bill. We should rather reform, which I heard him talk about as well, our governance institution and the way these things are done. At this point, we should all realize and accept that the kind of democracy we have and we are practicing is not working for us, it's not going to help us, and the earlier we do something about it, before it degenerates into chaos, then the better for all of us.
Bernard, stay with us because we need to unpack other matters as to how we can properly reform. I'll also hear from Prof shortly, but let me hear from Austin Game. And Austin, you've been around for quite some time now. You know you know the backstory as to how we got here. What's the story behind this whole Article 71 payment of ex gratia? And why is it becoming so attractive to the political class?
Thank you, and thank you, my other colleagues there.
Hello, Mr. Game? Mr. Game, if you can hear me, I was just asking, let's try one more time and see if we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah,
are you there with us?
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I think this thing gets cut off from time to time. Look, I think that let's be very fair to everybody. Whereas I agree that from pure moral point of view, what is being said may sound good. I happen to be a two-term member of parliament before, but I'm not a partisan politician. I understand politics, meaning decision-making on behalf of people, but not the kind of partisan politics that is being done in Ghana and the world today. I'm not part of that. I'm going to speak purely from a professional point of view. Now, to be honest, I think that we are being slightly unfair and grouping the whole thing on the basis of what is happening today. In the past, I happen to be one of the committee members that was put together by the late President Rawlings to put together the first condition of service. I represented Parliament and ministers of state when I was a member of Parliament. And we all know that the 1992 cohorts and 1996 cohorts virtually got nothing. But that notwithstanding, today, the reality is that members of parliament are also workers. Let's put it down right from the beginning. They are also workers, save that they are workers on a specific national contract for service. Now, these contracts of service can end at the first tenure of office, not because you want to end it.
Right.
Because the character and nature of the politics is that you can end your tenure of office just after first term because of the way the politics and the partisan politics of Africa and Ghana, no exception, is conducted. But that said, if you come to the reality, now, you cannot have a contract with people and you vary the contract without the consent of the people who are holders of that contract. So it is wrong for anybody under our Labor Act. You are not supposed to vary the contract for service under any form of condition of service of people who earn a certain amount of money, and then you deliberately, because of your economic condition, you vary it without the consent of the person concerned. You can raise concerns about it. It does not lie in the mouth of anybody to vary it without getting the people who are earners of these benefits, who it favors, to vary it without their consent. That's number one. Because when they take you to court, you will lose. No matter what you do, you will lose. Now, so what do we do? Our salary administration in this country is extended to these people who are Article 71 office holders. The mistake is that presidents, especially from the second, third, and fourth, they wait, like was said by my friend there, they wait and they will wait until last minute before they will set up a committee. That way, it's a very wrong way of administering people's condition of service. Because at the end of the day, the cumulative back pay they collect, it is presumed to be a huge sum of money, whereas they genuinely earn it. They genuinely earn this money, but they rather are losers because nobody pay interest on the money for them. They are rather losers. And so it is important, as I heard one of my colleagues there said, let them set up the committee tomorrow morning. Let them examine how the economic condition of the country is, the mood of the country is, and proceed to pay them what is due them. Then look at the composition of the committees. People from the trade unions are members of the committee. From the academia are members of the committee. The professor, Bedu Ntiamwa, is a professor from, I think, Cape Coast University or so. She was a chairperson. They all know their condition of service. The organized labor people who were members of the committee, they know the condition of service prevailing in the country. Whoever constituted the committee were part and parcel of it. They knew what is happening in the country. So we should not, under any circumstances, vary the condition of service of people without their consent. That's number one, because it's illegal to do that. And when you do it and they take you to court, you will surely lose. There's no way you can win that. So I think that we should be very, very careful. And
right, and very interesting points you're raising there.
No matter what people will say.
Right. So that's Austin Game's position on this. Clearly, there's the emergence of two big issues, the constitutional one and what's also pertaining to our labor laws. But how do we deal with that? Should we be appealing to the conscience of the MPs and the Article 71 office holders to try and take at least a haircut even as we face this economic crisis? We'll explore all of that. You're watching The Probe. We'll be back after this break, and we'll deal with that with my guests. Please stay. And you're welcome back to The Probe. We're simply talking about the payment of ex gratia as provided for under Article 71 of Ghana's 1992 Constitution. Professor Bobkin, if you're still with us, you were just, of course, raising that point when I brought in the other guest about freezing it until 2040. Some say we should even go beyond the 2040 range, for instance, from the Public Sector Workers Union and their perspective on this matter. But now we are also learning from Austin Game that there are two legal impediments, the Constitution itself, and what the labor law says. So from what the labor law says, we can only go up. How do we deal with that, in your view?
Yeah, thank you very much. I may not be well versed in this area,
right.
So forgive me. Just some caveat there. Listening to the former member of parliament, he said that what they take at the end of the day has two components. There is the accumulation of the back pay, which actually forms the bigger chunk of it. Then there is the ex gratia, right, aspect of it. So I think that it should be possible for us to look at the discussion along those two legs, right? So the ex gratia, which per the explanation may be different from the back pay that they receive. Probably all of that is summed up under that whole umbrella and all of that. Now, and it's also instructive from what Mr. Austin Game said, that I think those who were in the first 8 years or so actually didn't take anything. It's instructive that it was under the same constitution and all of that. So we are looking at the exigencies of the time, and we are saying that to the extent that when the committee, after they had finished working, determines how much they deserve, and that is made public, you see how the public receives that, right? So the whole point that we are making is that as a country, we should be looking at the whole remuneration and the inequality within all of that, so that there's some level of fairness in the administration of compensation for public sector workers.
But just by way of education, is there any benefit if we abort the back pay system and then pay them as we go?
Yeah, you can see a certain backdoor of elevating the remuneration of a category of workers. Is that okay? From the normal public sector workers. And I believe that it's a strategy. Okay, it's a strategy. And we cannot blame that on the Constitution. It's how we are operationalizing it. So here you have a scenario where, let's say the MP goes around saying that, look, our salary is so small. Maybe it's just 12,000. When they know that my actual salary is more than that, I'm going to receive this probably at the end. And it works well for them. If it doesn't, it wouldn't have been tolerated up to now. Okay, so more or less you receive all that bulk amount at the end, and then you go with it. So we should be looking at the whole administration, because the arguments for the less privileged majority, right, is that we can't pay. If you look at, in the course of the wage negotiation, what public sector workers actually put on the table in terms of what they want, and the argument from the state that we cannot pay, I'm not too sure that same dynamics play out when it comes to the emolument committee after 4 years and all of that. I think we need to just admit that. Okay, yes, and that is not to suggest that the committees that have been put in place over the years were incompetent or whatever. But I think if you look at the recent one, and the fact that even some people actually decided they won't take it and all of that, I think we should look at all of this within the different occupational groups. And we should be looking at fairness within that wage compensation and ask ourselves, look, my considered view is that if the state is comfortable to pay people 3,000 Ghana cedis or less than that a month, you can use that and determine their lifestyle, determine where they should be staying. If you went there and you didn't find them there, it means there's something wrong with the system. So because if you pay somebody living in Accra and all of that less than 3,000, and typically if you determine that probably by the 22nd or 23rd, such a person should not be on the face of the earth per his income, and then 31st comes and he's there and all of that, and it tells you that people have found other means, right, of sustaining a lifestyle beyond their regular pay slip. there may be a certain level of corruption out there that is almost a lifestyle now, in order for people to actually break even on a normal ground.
Okay.
So, and all of these things, we may be elevating it. So I think the conversation should be more of the fact that we are at the point where even bondholders who had legitimate contracts, okay, have been tampered with because the state cannot. People who worked and lent their money to the government under a contract. And I don't think that anybody's contract is superior than bondholders also. Okay, they have been asked that we need to do something to save the country and all of that. They have contracts.
Just a minute on this before I bring in Bernard. Just deal with this for me in a minute. The projection is that by 2025, the economic conditions may not be as it is now. Obviously, we'll go through that IMF process and things may become better. So that's a justification, perhaps, to say, well, if we're paying ex gratia by that time, there shouldn't be any problems.
Well, no, I don't think that the problems will just disappear with the passage of months or years. It requires work. It requires real things that we have to do. Bear in mind that the thorny issue under this IMF program is debt sustainability. The IMF program is a 3-year program, okay? But the IMF is telling us that we cannot attain debt sustainability under a 3-year program. So in our history now, we are having to exit an IMF program with debt unsustainability because the end date for debt sustainability is 2028. Okay. Now, if government's perspective was the fact that by 2025 we would have exited these problems, then what was the basis for structuring the new instrument to end 2038? Okay, so people who were supposed to get their money 2027 and the rest of them are now having to wait to 2038 and the rest of them. Remember, in the memorandum, because they pushed back and eliminated certain clauses, government could actually vary this without even the consent of the bondholders. So, and let's look at it holistically, that if it's about affordability and all of that, I think all of us will be able to come to the table so that we are able to look at what adjustment we can make across the board.
Right. Okay.
And that secures our common future.
Okay. And for you, Ras Mubarak, do you ever have a situation where, for instance, the ex gratia is advanced to you? Because the point we're getting from Austin Game, for instance, is that under the, I mean, when the Fourth Republic was starting, that was a fresh period. It was part of the committee. Your conditions were determined much more faster. I mean, by extension, the MPs. Do you ever have a situation where the ex gratia is advanced to you, for instance? So we can have it paid in real time. I guess that's the essence of the question.
Well, there certainly have been instances where, people, have taken, salary advance, even for people who are not members of parliament. Currently, as we speak, I know for a fact that banks in the country are chasing members of parliament to come for loans in advance of the ex gratia because they know parliamentary primaries are around the corner. So these things, do occur every now and then. But I think in dealing with this particular issue, it requires some level of, we have spoken about this time and again, year in, year out, the discussion over the propriety of ex gratia did not start today blessed. It's been on the lips of many all over the years, and there hasn't been that political will. And I think the citizenry have also not pressed the appropriate levers to bring to bear the required pressures that would require for elected officials to actually do the right thing in the best interest of the country. Because look, whether you like it or not, and this is not to say that Article 71 office holders are only MPs and ministers. There's a tall list, which includes the Attorney General, which includes judges, you know, which includes the electoral commissioner and the rest, you know. But if there was enough public outcry
right.
about the need for us to look at how the country's resources are expended, I believe these things would happen. I haven't yet to see a situation where MPs are told that, look, in view of issue A, B, C, and D, we expect you, the one running for office, to go in there and fight for this. And if you did not do that, you are out, you know, in the next election.
Let me ask a hypothetical question.
You know,
let me ask a hypothetical question here. If you are seeking to go back to Parliament, if you get into Parliament now, and you were talking about political will earlier, and you have a situation where your colleagues have approved that of the president has equally approved that for the members of Parliament, will you receive that ex gratia if it's paid into your account?
My position on this is that if MPs, and this is public, you know, in all the media discussions that I've had about this issue over the years, my position is that, has always been that, if MPs are returning, you know, there's no need to pay them ex gratia. This is different from back pay, all right? If you were elected today and in 4 years you got re-elected, you are not retired. Why must we pay you a retirement benefit?
But in your case, for instance, your case is unique. In your case,
I'm sorry?
You've left, there was a gap, you're back now. How do we deal with that? Would you take the ex gratia if it's paid to you? Hello, Rice. Okay, it appears we've lost.
Who is not comfortable eating his words? I'm sorry, can you hear me, Blessed?
Yeah, yes. Would you take that, yes or no?
Yes, so I was saying that if MPs are returning to Parliament, I mean, if I go in, because there was a gap and it was paid to me, and I'm going in again, on principle, I don't think I deserve it. And I don't think anyone, be they MPs, be they Commissioner for the Electoral Commission, be they Commissioner on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, be they ministers or whosoever, you know, should not be taking ex gratia every 4 years, you know, whilst they are in active service. I mean, it's insane, you know, and it is issues like this that clearly bring about a collapse in politicians and how we're running the country.
All right,
we are in very, very dire straits that requires for us to, you know, make sacrifices and take decisions that are in the long-term best interest of the country.
So let me hear from Bernard J on this. Bernard, the way forward, very briefly, where do we start off from?
All right, thank you very much. But permit me to make some quick observations on the submissions so far. One, I agree with Mr. Game that yes, you cannot vary the contract of someone or a worker without his or her consent. But you see, whenever there are issues, we would have to look at it carefully and address it in perspective. And that's why I choose to go with the governance dimension that was earlier thrown in, as well as what policy directions we want to follow. Because when you look at it critically, we are also talking about people who make these policies or who take these decisions vis-a-vis those who are recipients or beneficiaries of those decisions. And if you could ask those who were close to the negotiations with public sector-based pay negotiation, they will tell you that they saw a different organized labor. And I have to say that it is going to be like that from now onwards. And some of the issues Prof talked about are some of the things we are negotiating on.
Because for the sake of time, are you taking any steps in the coming days on that?
Well, no, for now, I think we are all in a certain situation. We are all trying to navigate ourselves out of that situation. what we are saying, and now we have stronger basis and moral right and legal right to stand for, is that Article 71 should be looked at. There are things that can be done now before we even look at either the amendment of the Constitution or the other. And it's very instructive that Austin Game mentioned those who were, it's not like the ex gratia is entrenched in the Constitution. The committee that first worked on those who served 92 first 2 terms did not receive it. Austin Game has attested to that. So it means that this came later on. The committees that will be constituted to determine these things would have to factor what is happening to our country now into that determination.
I get the point.
It out.
Thank you, Bernard. Let me give the final word to you, Mr. Austin Game, as we wrap up. Fortunately, time is not on our side. Your concluding remarks.
Yeah, let me be very honest with you. I think that there is some unfairness in all these attributions to some of the political office holders. There are people who take their pay at the end of their tenure of office as pay forever till they die. There are people who also receive some superannuation and so forth and so on. There are people who also take other benefits, but we don't talk about it in public. The political office holders are the people we have engaged. What they should have been doing is to pay them, those who lost election, they should consider them as having suffered severance of their office and therefore paid some kind of redundancy pay because they are no longer going to be around. So it's severance, but the language was not properly used when they were trying to place it properly in the Constitution, and also so there's some reforms that will be required.
All right,
some reforms to be required.
And I'm grateful. Indeed, the conversation is just starting. Mr. Austin Game, I'm grateful for your time. That's it for the probe for tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.